I didn't have the word for it then, but it was really the uncoupling of I can't afford you from your bad. Someone that says I can't afford that, that's literally all it means. There is no other meaning or connotation around it.
Welcome to the Holistic Life Navigation Podcast, where we explore life through the lens of somatics. I'm Luis Mujica, a somatic educator who teaches people how to find safety in themselves. Your turn to learn begins now. Okay, so I was saying I'm really curious to talk about money, specifically through the lens of rates. So individuals, entrepreneurs, someone with a product. There's so much I have learned in the past 8 years of my private practice and my business that has taught me that money is beyond money, and it's really linked to capacity. There's a somatic resonance and relationship to money. And again, I'm really only learning it recently, but I wanted to play with it. And I couldn't think of anyone better to talk to about it than Camille Marika. One, because Marika was just clutching a burrito-shaped pillow because it's a difficult topic. And two, because Camille is like, she pushes us, like you have built capacity to ask for money. And I want to learn, what that was like for you and what that means. I fear if it was just Marika and I here, I don't know if this, I think our house would be built of like straw wrappers and we'd be living in there together, right? Just
what I know is you're going to ask for $5 and I'll be like, what about 100? And she'll be like, it's $25,000.
That's exactly right. That is it. That's us in a nutshell. I'm like delusional. You are like average. You are over the top.
We want to be more like Camille.
Everyone listening, we're not judging Camille. We're aspiring to be like her.
Mm-hmm.
So let's actually start with you, Camille. Like let's talk about your lineage with money. Like how'd you grow up with it without, like, tell us the whole story.
Yeah. So, I've shared on some other podcasts that part of my healing journey was coming to the realization that part of me finding safety outside of my body was in money. So a big part of my growing up from my parents and grandparents was get a successful, go to a good college, get a successful job, you have a stable paycheck, and you will be happy as a result of that stable paycheck. So that was a big part of my foundation.
Now, wait. Does that mean, did your parents have financial stability? Like, did they work hard and that were their values?
They did. So they ended up going to a 4-year university, and their family's one of the first ones to do so. They ended up getting a salaried position. They were part of the generation that transitioned from blue collar to white collar. And so they were part of that, we made it kind of generation. And then I was supposed to carry that on. Yeah.
God. So you and Music Carolyn really had like a parallel story, because she was talking in her episode about, I think she was born more like sound like middle upper class. I can't remember, but so would you say you were born into middle upper? Is that kind of where you were?
I would say definitely middle class. Yeah. Because I remember growing up and I would have relatives and cousins. They come over to the house and be like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are rich," and I was like, "What? What are you talking about? You got a backyard?" And so like we were one of the first ones in our families to have a backyard. And so there is that connection to safety being in money. If you do this, particularly being Black in the United States, and then with me in particular being a woman, if you have money, people can't mess with you. And so there was sort of that teaching. Yeah.
Let's stay there, because I think it'd be fun if we all kind of have our backgrounds in money first, and then we can kind of go follow up. So Marika, what was your history with money? What was that like?
I bounced my first check in 8th grade and I've never looked back.
So you started early.
I did. We're comfortable, I think, probably middle class. But I don't know, maybe, my dad was a teacher. But because I had some really generous grandparents as well, like I didn't ever really want for anything. And my parents were, I think, pretty good with money. At least my mom was. And they really tried to instill that in me, and I rejected it wholeheartedly.
Like consciously, you were like, "Fuck this."
No, I've never been. It's never been something I was comfortable with, and I was always weirdly more comfortable not having it you know. And now that I do have some, it's just been an interesting journey reconciling those two things, you know. So yeah, and now, and I have a kid who's in his 20s, and I of course also wish that I had taught him how to be better with money, but I also just look at it from a different lens. In the last 10 years, like when you're sick, it's like, and when I'm well, like I just want to go out and enjoy myself, and planning for the future hadn't been a part of it, and now it is a part of my life. So, I've run the gamut, but historically terrible with money.
It's interesting. I love hearing this because I was born into more lower class, and then we became middle class. Like I think when I was 12, I remember my mother like suddenly found one of my dad's tax returns, and she was shocked because like he had been living as if we were poor, because he grew up in an immigrant home. That's such a controversial thing to say nowadays. Like it can sound rude, but that's just my family. And so that the mentality was like, you don't spend a dime, like you don't spend anything you have unless it is like an emergency. My grandfather literally hid tens of thousands of dollars in cash all over the house they found when he died. But you would never know he had money. He wore ripped clothing. He bought nothing. He only had used cars. Like everything was really frugal, right? Um, and then my mom's side of the family, she grew up extremely poor. They would go without eating. So both my parents came from the kind of like my dad was comfortable, but they lived poor, like, with that mentality because my grandpa was so afraid of not having money, and my mom grew up with zero money ever. So she overcoupled like joy and freedom to not having money. Like she loved just getting a job and quitting it and traveling and kind of living her life just in a really kind of easy minimalist way. So she actually liked not having money. My dad overcoupled like kind of what you were saying, Camille, everything with money, but specifically like protection and secrecy was so much interwoven with him with money. So by the time I was 11 or 12, my mom found his tax returns, and she was like, we're middle class. Why are we living this way? Like, why are we arguing over groceries and shoes? And then it kind of like things started shifting a bit. Not crazy, but we went on, one vacation a year, 2 days a year, things like that. It wasn't this big lifestyle. But what we inherit is what I'm interested about with this conversation we're starting to weave, because I overcoupled money as a bad thing for a long, 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 long time. And I won't say bad in the way of like capitalism bad like relationally. Like I thought if I had money, I'd be like my grandpa, my dad, and I'd be really hard on people, and I'd be really withheld, and I'd be very stingy, and I wouldn't be happy. And so I thought every time I get money, I have got to like release it right away. I have to buy something with it for somebody else, like go on a trip or like give it away, literally give it to someone in the street. Like I couldn't hold it for more than an hour or two the moment I got a paycheck. So I was just spending, spending, spending. So just to go over to Camille now, you overcoupled money with security. You become an adult. We know your history. You go into the corporate world to make money. What happens next?
Uh, so really the first, now I'm making a salary for the first time in my life. And so, we're talking about, five, 5 figures, nothing crazy, just like out of college. But one of the first things you're going on interviews and they ask you, what would you like to make? And I didn't realize how unprepared I was for that question. Like coming up through business school, they do all these mock interviews and things like that, but they don't really address that. But like I kind of done some research, and I provided a salary that I was comfortable with, and I got it. But what I also realized, or I can look back and realize, is that I also provided a number that I didn't think they would balk at, that I knew they would accept, or would it keep me from getting the job? And so that was really the first time I started putting a numerical value to my worth and my time and what I'm able to provide. And yeah, there were some learnings that had to happen from that point to where I am now.
Now, those learnings, Did you learn that just by diving in? Because this was before you did work with us. You didn't have
Mhm.
this language of somatics.
Yeah.
So like how did you build your capacity without those words at the time to actually say this is my worth, this is what I want?
Yeah, so it was definitely a process. So first, I had to realize that I was being undervalued by the companies that I was working for. So, and it wasn't a surprise. Like I knew about pay gap disparities, but I could look at the work I was providing. I could literally look at the income and the revenue I was bringing in to these companies, and I could also know that so and so is getting paid a lot more than I am. And when I would even try to raise that, like but still like really, really in a polite way, it was dismissed. It was like, oh, it's no big deal, or that's life, or oh, you should have asked for more when you joined the company. It was always just sort of dismissed. So there's first just that realization of not only do I know I'm getting underpaid, these people know they're underpaying me. And it was just first just sitting with that and even building up enough capacity to say like, hey, I think I'm getting underpaid, and even just to have it dismissed. There had to be enough capacity in me to do that. But I really started to explore it when I seriously considered leaving corporate America and like really working for myself and trying to understand. So then if I'm setting my own prices, what does that look like? And in order for me to do that, I had to do a lot of research. And it really helped when I came across this phenomenon or statistic of, again, not just this pay disparity, which I knew about, that women and people of color generally get paid less, but that you go in accepting less when you're a woman or you're a person of color, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're an employee, you will go in asking for less money than usually a straight white male would, because you're afraid that, oh, they're not going to hire me, or they're going to balk at these prices. And then I'm just not going to make any money at all. So let me give them a price that they'll accept. And so it was really interesting to sit with it from that perspective of, yes, there are external forces that can push your prices lower, but then there are internal forces
Okay,
that
pause right there.
are pushing your prices lower. Yeah.
That's so good. I want to go into this internal force place because I mean that's the work that I love to talk about the most, because
Mhm.
I don't like to deny reality, but I love to find our agency within reality. And part of this, I just literally just learned this before we got on here, because I've never been in any corporate position, so I didn't realize you went in and kind of like named your price in the way you have. And that's amazing, because all my life when I heard, again, pay gap or disparity, especially in these corporate settings, I always thought it was like, no, they assigned you an amount based on your race or your gender. But you're saying in your experience and a lot of these corporate experiences, it comes from really what we're talking about is the fawn response. It comes from, I'm going to say something low enough that I know they can't say no, because you have a historical experience, with whether it's marginalization, or you're the first one of your family, so it's very new, so you don't think you're worth a lot, or you don't think they think you're worth a lot. I think this is fascinating because I wrote down something Marika said: more comfortable not having money. And whenever we say I'm more comfortable with dot dot dot, whatever that is, we're talking about what we have capacity for. So if I'm really comfortable saying to my boss, you know what, I know this is like a 60K a year job, I'm very happy with 35. I won't make a sound. I'll be so good. I work overtime. I have capacity to ask for that, even though I know I'm worth twice that. And I've always resonated with statistics that come out about women, because I'm much more feminine than most men in a lot of situations. So I've totally undercut myself when the few jobs I had where I was able to ask for a raise, I would go in and be like, I have 25 cents, when I knew I could ask for $3, because I knew they would say yes. So I didn't have the capacity to assert even how I valued myself. So I'm shifting into this place so we can all kind of play with our rate as our capacity, our need, and how we value ourselves. Where do we want to go with that? Where does that take us?
Well, yeah, capacity was a big part of how I embraced like upping my rates. Like, it's funny now that, my rule used to be, okay, let me give them a price that I don't think will shock them. Now it's the opposite. If people aren't shocked by my prices, it's a signal to me that it's too low. Yeah.
Gosh, this is why. So I just have to say, this is why when I put out my newsletter about my retreat that sold out in 2 hours, everyone's congratulating me, and then Camille texted me, "Congratulations, Dash. That's a sign of a low fee." Like straight up calling me out. I was like, okay, thanks for popping my ego bubble. But you're right. Like I tend to put out rates that are so low, you almost like have to do it because
Yeah.
you're not even gonna think twice.
Yes.
And both of you have been stretching me, which I appreciate. But let's talk about that a little bit. What are you thinking, Marika? I saw her make a face.
I was thinking it doesn't necessarily feel capacity for like like a rate. I felt like it was more capacity for hearing no. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love
Like
that.
where the goal is to go in and not feel awkward, uncomfortable, embarrassed that they said no to me. You know, and so you go to the number you want and you back off a little. It was kind
I
of
love
how I would
that.
do it. And I never had to do that very much in corporate. I was lucky that I worked more in percentages because I was in like the spa industry. But um, when I had to get out of the spa industry, you know, and it was like, what salary are you looking for? I mean, I had no idea. I'd be Googling it in the car on my way into the interview. And if the number was too high and I was uncomfortable with it, I would not go anywhere near it, even though I knew this was like the market rate.
Mm-hmm.
No, but it just would be like, it just feels weird to have to say that out loud, that I want, deserve, and need X amount of money.
You're bringing me to a place in myself of the vulnerability that comes in from asking, really like anything, but especially asking something that is so risky. Like when Camille says, if I don't think they're going to be shocked, I won't even go there now. Like I want the number to be shocking. That would be a risk for so many people, whether it's a risk to their actual livelihood or a risk to their ego, like we're talking about here with the no and the rupture that comes from the no. So I'm also hearing a capacity for vulnerability because, those of you listening, this was the first year after 3 years that I raised the rate for my 6-week course. It was for the longest time, it was a $300 course. And I mean, so much had changed with this course. It went from 4 weeks to 6 weeks. It went from one meeting a week to now it's 4 meetings a week. It went from replays only to now you can download everything. It went to audio exercises. I mean, this course became like a 6-week lifestyle. And so I doubled it this year for 600. And most of me was really ready, especially with so much support from you two. And there was this, I could feel this vulnerability in me that was saying, a lot of people are going to say no now, right? Because it's, to me, it's still super accessible for what I'm offering, but compared to what it was, it might not be accessible in people's minds or realities. So that vulnerability, I think there's a capacity building there. And I wonder, I'm going back to Camille for a moment, how did and do you navigate that vulnerable place of like, this person might turn me away because I'm asking for a lot?
Yeah, I didn't have the word for it then, but it was really the uncoupling of I can't afford you from your bad. Someone that says I can't afford that, that's literally all it means. There is no other meaning or connotation around it. All it means is they can't afford me right now. So be it. And that's what I had to come to a place of some comfort and settling in, because I found like when I was undercutting myself, that was really coming from a place of scarcity of like, but if they say no, nobody else is ever going to say, no one else is going to say yes, then I'm not going to be able to pay my bill. And it was just this snowball. Or it was, well, who am I? Well, I've been asking for this. It was all these other things. But if I could just focus on this one person or this one company said, I can't afford that. Okay. And move on to the next. That's all it was. That was really, really helpful for me. And sort of back to what we were talking about as well. I also just oriented to the prices that I set allow me to have the capacity to do the work that I do. Like I think about, in order for me to do the work that I do, I don't want to go grocery shopping. I don't want to mow my lawn. I don't want to iron my husband's shirts. So I outsource that work so I have the capacity to do it. I have to be able to fund those things. So I also orient to that. And again, that's all it means. That's all it's related to.
Okay, so I'm lit up. Two reasons. I'm lit up because I love the awareness of the uncoupling there. Because as you're saying, I could feel parts of me uncoupled that were still braced. And that's a big one, isn't it? If we think about, if I like when you said about the no, Marika, the no is so scary, not because the no, because what's overcoupled. That's what we're actually afraid of. So if the no means I'm not worth much to them, if that's what it means to us, we do not want to hear that no. But if we just hear no, they don't have it, they don't want to have it, it's whatever their story is, it's theirs, and there's no overcoupling, we just gracefully move on to the next person or the next ask. So that's a great kind of real life example of how overcouplings run our lives, without until we understand they're there and how to separate them. So I love that. And one of the things I wanted to talk about, you just mentioned rates nurture, serve, build our capacity. The money we make is literally a transfer of energy to build capacity. And it's not transfer of energy like value in a mental space. To me, it's a somatic transfer. So depending on what I'm getting, it allows my body to have capacity to do whatever the work it is I do. And I think this is where, for my work at least, I guess both of you now, because the work you do with me, when you're doing trauma work, there's a natural overcoupling that you should be like a humble servant. And I came from an Irish Catholic, upbringing. So I remember seeing the nuns wake up from their convents and have no material belongings. They could never get married. They could never have kids because just like the ayahuasqueros in South America, there was an extra communication from the community and the society. So you only could focus on healing and serving. Now, if you have no responsibility in the world except for serving, you have a shit ton of capacity to serve. But when you're living in a modern setting where you have bills and you have a family and you're navigating your own illnesses, perhaps your own life, you don't have capacity just to serve because your capacity also goes to life and responsibilities. So I'm saying that especially for those listening, because those of us in the healing field, we think we're not allowed to live at a certain level of finance or ask for a certain rate or whatever it is, or how we charge for our product or whatever it is, because our work is healing. It should be accessible even if it's to the detriment of our own capacity. So can we unpack that together a little bit? And actually, I want Marika to start because I know you're much you trauma bond with me around that more than Camille does right now. So like, where does that go for you? How do you handle that with people we have to turn away, let's say, and stuff like that?
Oh, you mean when we had to turn people away?
Yeah, like even in our work that we do. Yeah.
I mean, kind of like, how I came to this work. I just think, maybe it's just not aligned, maybe it's just, they're not, I mean, it's not necessarily they're not ready, but we have turned people away who have then come back, and whatever it is that changed in them, they made it work. And I know for me, I've had to have a lot of, well, you and I have had a lot of shoring up resources so that I can say no to people. Sort of the reverse fawn or whatever it is, because I want everybody to have access to this work and that type of a thing. But I also know, I want people to have access to this work, and we're also a business. And so, making sure that I remember that we're at that intersection, and that we can offer other things. Like if they can't afford the course, we have other things that I get to offer to them that are affordable. It's when there's not something that I can, if we didn't have anything to offer instead, because you have so many free things out there, the podcast and Instagram, and the webinars on our website are pretty inexpensive. Like, that settles my nervous system, because then I know that we're still being able to have our hand out to people, but I also know that we're taking care of ourselves on the other end by saying no saying no when we need to.
So I want to highlight what you just said, just for everyone listening. Let's see what it's like as a practice, whether we all want to do this in our mind right now or when you go into the world. The next time you see a product, the next time you want to work with someone, you see what their rate is. Let's see that amount as what the person needs to take care of themselves. Because I love that you just said that. Like, we're also taking care of ourselves. And if we can overcouple positively someone's rate or fee with, again, what they need to take care of themselves, just like you said, Camille, like someone has to mow my lawn. I want like I'm assuming a meal delivery service or some kind of catering, and like someone takes care of our laundry. That's what you need to have the capacity to parent two small kids and work really hard in the work you do to make enough money to, create safety for your family and sustenance. So if it's about, I guess what I'm saying is, if I'm looking at someone's rate and my first thought is that's too much, what I'm doing is I'm not being curious about what that means for me or them. But if I see it and I'm like, oh, I don't have that right now, that's what they need to feel good about offering this, then I'm going into a relational curiosity of, oh, this is what they need to feel good about offering this. This is what they need to sustain themselves. I don't have it right now. Let me reorient to where I can get some kind of, accessibility or some kind of help. And that is what we've created. We've created these webinars, like $25. And we have the somatic drop-in and the addiction circle every month that are free. I do the navigating episodes on the podcast, so people know there's something they can do a free practice with every other week. There's Instagram. I had so many people tell me, oh, I'm so glad you have Instagram. I don't even have to go to therapy anymore, and I couldn't afford it and I couldn't find it. So there are these places that exist that, I mean, the brilliance of technology where I can do this one conversation with you two for an hour and it lives and anyone can check it out and it doesn't strain any of us out because we already did it. Like there's a reciprocity and a generosity to that, to working in that realm. So I just love this idea of this allows us to take care of ourselves. And I'm going to go into something in a moment, but I want to go to Camille. Okay, I see you lighting up over there. Start thinking something's going on. Well, what do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is for me. Like, this is what allows us to take care of ourselves. And I always like to remind myself and others that it's not about cost, it's about value. So oftentimes we're like, but this would only cost you, or we estimate this would only cost you XYZ to do this. I prefer to focus, what is the value? And it's okay if what I perceive the value to be and what you perceive the value to be aren't aligned, then we don't have to work with each other. But it's also about what is this value to you? And not just the value I might be paying as a customer, but the value I'm paying as a provider. For example, for me to do 1 hour of one-on-one work with someone, I have to not only think about what it costs me to do that hour, but what else I could be doing with this hour. I could be playing with my children. I could be doing some yoga. I could be reading that book I've been wanting to catch up on. So there is a trade-off for me. There has to be a trade-off that is worth it, frankly. And again, I'm at a point where I don't have a lot of guilt or apology in saying that. But I know there are a lot of people who do, like, that sounds selfish. And we've talked about this before. I think that's where that sense of entitlement comes from. I'm entitled to your time. No, you're not. Nobody is entitled to my time. It is my choice who I choose to give my time to and for what I choose to exchange it.
See, you just read my mind because I'm going to talk about the entitlement piece, and that's exactly right. When you start looking at everything through a somatic lens, at least for me, it really humbles and grounds me, and it takes me way away from entitlement because I realize anything I think I'm entitled to literally translates into I'm entitled to your body, because everything that we offer comes through our bodies. For me to have the mental clarity to teach a really successful course, like let's say like one 90-minute lecture, my brain, my nutrition, my biochemistry, me being in a triggered place, me being grounded, all that, my lifestyle accounts for how I show up for that 90 minutes. So you're not paying me for a 90-minute lecture. You're paying me for how I live. And that lecture is like my platform to express from how I live. And I think that if we can see it that way, like you're saying, like not cost but value, especially the part of, I'm doing this for 90 minutes. I could be doing yoga, I could be gardening, I could be playing with my daughter, I could be helping someone for free. Like there's a lot of things I could be doing in my life. I'm here with you, right? And so it's also not just what I'm doing with you in this 90 minutes, but what I'm not doing in my own life. And I think for those of us in any kind of service industry, whether it's someone that's a waitress or someone that's a therapist, like we're using our body and our capacity and our breath and our brain and heart to connect and offer something to you. And that's a privilege as far as I'm concerned. Like that's not something I think we just think we should have. Um, where do you go with that, Marika? What are you thinking?
I mean, I definitely agree that, if that it is the body, that it is a service, that it's something that we really choose to do. I specifically was a manicurist for many, 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 many years. And that was literally using my body to, in offerings or whatever it was, and that was it was hard on the body, but it definitely, like, because it's a relational type of business, and I had repeat people and I knew people for 10 years or 20 years or whatever. um I really enjoyed it because I did get to choose who I wanted to spend my time with. And then there were other people who would come in that I didn't know and I never saw them again or whatever. But within kind of the majority of my clients were people that I'd had for many, many, many years. And so it was doubly rewarding, to be able to spend time with people and give them my time. And do stuff like participate in their weddings, and their anniversaries and their big birthdays or whatever it was. It got beyond, the thing that I did. And the relational part to me was where I got the most benefit from, the benefit. The money was good, but it wasn't just going in and clocking in and clocking out. That I don't think that would have appealed to me, um, that there was an opportunity to create relationships within that, is something that I really relate to in our business. Like I know we have hundreds and hundreds of people, but we've seen people for a few years at least, if not more, and have been able to create relationships with them in the way that I know that they understand what we're offering and what they're getting, and and I feel like there's a really good relationship there. I don't even know if I answered your question.
Oh yeah. I mean, anything you say is perfect for me. I love that. No, I love that piece, the relational piece. That's important to me. Because again, I think when we're talking about money, it's hard because there are a lot of triggers and overcouplings with money and with capitalism and with products and all these things. Um, I'm kind of curious. I don't know if it's a big question or not. I'll find out. But I always saw and see capitalism as this like really beautiful instrument, which is hard to say, right? Well, not hard for me to say, hard for people to hear, because I think we conflate capitalism. And I was talking about this with Simone when she was on the podcast. I think we overcouple capitalism with consumerism and materialism and corporatism, but they're not inherently part of capitalism. Like capitalism is just I created something and I have the right to sell it to you and you have the right to deny it. Like it's a super free, empowering agency, gifting solution to a lot of things. When it gets filled with, corporatism and fascism and outsourcing to other countries that we deplete their resources through it, that's a whole different arm. But the root of it is just kind of like, just like you said, Camille, okay, I'm deciding the value of something. You have every right to deny that value or take it. Where do you two go with that?
I'm
Okay,
just gonna say my favorite podcast is an anti-capitalist podcast called Upstream. So that's all I'm gonna say. I want to hear what Camille has to say.
So yeah, I feel so for me, I get when people say like, oh, capitalism is bad. I know where they're coming from, but to me, it's not. Capitalism isn't bad. Toxic capitalism is bad. In the same way, masculinity is not bad. Toxic masculinity is bad. And on both sides, we can conflate the two. But to your point, the actual premise of whether it's capitalism or socialism or other economic forms, or I feel the same way about religion, like the actual basis, the idea of the philosophy is great. It's when we start to throw on all that other stuff, usually rooted in colonization, where it starts to ebb into that toxic place. We actually move away from the underpinning of it. So like to your point, the underpinning of capitalism is I have a product. If people want it, they buy it. If they don't, I'll stop making it. That's the idea. Where we start to see that toxicity come in is where we start putting in rules that actually don't allow for that even playing field, or we start taking advantage of certain populations, things of that nature. That to me isn't capitalism. That's toxic capitalism.
I agree with you. And I think when I think of I'm always seeing everything through that decolonial lens of relationship or domination. And when I'm using the tool of capitalism that I'm born into, like I don't think capitalism will dismantle in my lifetime. I don't think so. Maybe my grandchildren, who knows? But it's not going to go away in my lifetime. So what I've learned, the same thing with trauma, how you can't just make someone's trauma go away. What you do with trauma, as you two know, is we slowly titrate we transform it. So we relate to it. We get curious. We create a relationship. So instead of me saying I hate capitalism, I'm interested in saying, well, what's the being of capitalism? Like, what's its true spirit without all the toxicity surrounding it, like you said, Camille? And how can I relate to it to transform it? And what we do at HLN is like perfect example, because the product is a relationship. It's not a thing. So you're not getting some plastic box that you have to throw into a landfill. Like you're getting real human interest and curiosity and connection. And then we've seen this, especially in the membership, we've seen members then create their own like side offerings, right? We have this little space called external offerings, just for those of you listening. And people will put things in there. Like someone does a beautiful vocal sanctuary. Someone else did a conversation around this for practitioners. People do like women's circles. People do like queer circles, like all these different things that emerge. And I think it's just beautiful to see how capitalism, all these people giving us their money, and then we create this capacity for ourselves and all of them to have a safe space to relate and grow from. It's this beautiful, again, example to me of a non-toxic, very balanced, like relational form of capitalism, where it's so rooted in the ethics of what's relating here and what's dominating here. What do you think about that, Camille? Put that in your pipe and smoke it, Marika. What do you think?
I'm gonna eat it. I'm gonna eat it through this giant burrito.
Okay, so Marika has these moments where you have to go on YouTube to see them. And right now she is holding a plush black bean burrito. And it's giant and it's adorable. And it reminds me of something from my youth.
Really?
Something disturbing. I'm trying to think what it is. Some kind of like strange.
Don't sully my burrito.
Okay. I won't tell you what it is. I'll if I figure it out, I'll let you know. But no, truly, what do you think about that? I'm curious where that goes to you, because you're anti-capitalist, which I love that we have someone differing here. Like, where does it go for you?
Well, I mean, I think I'm anti-capitalist to the anti-toxic capitalism. I'm certainly on the way to, because I really like, Camille, what you said. That made a lot of sense to me. And also, I just feel incredibly confronted by a lot of the issues around capitalism every day. And it feels like sweeping water back into the ocean, But I really like the idea of wow, how we offer and how at HLN and the relational parts. I think it's hard for me to get out of binary thinking, no matter what it is we're talking about. And so it's just good for me to notice those things. But yeah, capitalism for me is bad when I look at it through specific lens, and the things that I've had to do for it, over the years, the fawning and the hustling and the grinding and so trying to find what's been interesting for me with working with HLN is making steady money and figuring out how I'm going to exist in a capitalism world in a way where I still feel good about what I'm offering, how I'm showing up, what I'm donating to, like whatever it is. That's kind of where I'm at with that. But I like that we are trying to do it more relationally and and in the spirit of helping people. That to me is the most important part. And that we're trying to, that our culture, we're trying to make our culture a little bit different, which I find really calming. It's really soothing to my nervous system, knowing that it's like, oh, I don't have a boss who's like a boss, and I don't have I don't ever feel like I'm going into work and it's like we gotta make money, like that type of a thing. We're just supposed to show up as ourselves and help other people, and we actually get to make money doing it. Which I wish more people had that experience.
Yeah, we're so lucky when you put it that way. I'm like, we're so lucky.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And yeah, you definitely don't have a boss that wants to make money. You have a boss who's enjoying making money for the first time in his life. But if it wouldn't be for you two, I'd be like still being like, yeah, you can come to the course for free. It's
$5 next week will be $3. No, Luis, wrong way.
Well, it's important for people to hear, because I remember when I was in private practice before I hired Marika, I had so many clients. So I used to think it was just normal. I always thought, oh, I have the normal amount. Like, this is what full-time private practice looks like. And I'd be with colleagues, or I'd be in peer supervision, and everyone would be sharing how many clients they had. And everyone had like 20 to 30. I was like, I had 60 a week. I was like 20 to 30. And I didn't realize how much I was burning myself out until I got more into the somatic awareness. Because if someone lost their job, like in the middle of therapy with them, I would not discontinue. If someone, suddenly, even people that were like so transparent, they were like, I really want to go to Bali. I can't afford sessions anymore. I'd be like, oh, it's okay. Pay me what you can. So it wasn't even people that didn't have the money. They were prioritizing other things. And so I had such bad money boundaries because I just wanted to serve. But then Marika knows this, especially through 5-6 years of building a practice on just serving with no money boundaries. I couldn't pay my taxes for 5 years. I'm still paying taxes from 6 years ago because they built up and they became like a mortgage. They're huge. And so I'm really learning now, oh, I actually can serve better when I have really good money boundaries, because I can ensure my survival. I can ensure like crises, even with the team in the future, if there's things that come up with us and we need more money, knowing that, oh, I don't have to fall back on paying all my taxes 4 years later, in small little payment chunks. I can do it now and then be called up. So in case there's a medical, whatever it is. But it's this real security of, this is what I need now to be able to take care of all of you really well and show up really, really beautifully. And so I'm loving this conversation because it's so nice to talk about money in a real way that isn't like, we're not presencing it as what is important about it. And we're not denying it as if it doesn't exist and we don't care about it. Like, all three of us love money. Like, I've seen it, I've experienced it. It's like we have Marika's doing thumbs up. Like, none of us have an issue receiving money. My issue was, like Camille opened this talk about, was how to actually say what I wanted financially. I couldn't. You tell me what you want to give me, I can handle that. But for me to tell you what you're going to give me, I can't handle that. But now I can. It's amazing.
But here's one thing that I find interesting, and Camille, I'd love to know if I'm sure it's the same, but now that where I'm at now is so different than 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And now for me, once I hit a certain point, like rate, or where I'm like, oh, I do feel like I'm being compensated in a way that works for me. You know what I mean? it is really hard for me to see myself going back. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that I could walk into a room now and not ask for at least this. You know what I mean? Like where I'm at now. Because it just would not feel right, in my body. And not just here's what my bills are and I need to be able to pay stuff, but that like once I tasted it, it's like we're not going back. I'm not going back to bargain basement champagne, Louise. It's not happening.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm the same way. And yeah, I can't really see myself like going back in terms of being uncomfortable with walking away from something just because they couldn't afford it. Um, and like I really, how do I put it? I like being able to set certain prices because there are those one-offs where, okay, yeah, I'll do this for a lot lower for an individual or for a nonprofit organization. Yeah, what I charge a corporate organization is vastly different than what I would charge a nonprofit organization. But what I charge a corporate organization gives me the capacity to not charge as much for a nonprofit. And so I like you said, not having or having that space. And yeah, I can't see myself going back. Yeah.
I love hearing that with both of you. It's inspiring
Yeah.
because what I sense as well for you, Marika, when I think of what you're saying is like, it's not just like this last year or two that took you to the point you're at. Your whole life brought you to this point. So if I think of you like getting another job, which you're not allowed to,
No.
you're never leaving me. Wait, but if I imagine that happening, it's like you have a felt sense of how your whole life, especially the work that we do, your whole life informs your skill set. It's not just what you do in a year or hour by hour. So it's like paying people based on their whole life experience. That's a whole other level to what we're talking about, and seeing people's rates as that. Like, what have we been saying? We when we do the course, we always say 6 weeks to learn, a lifetime to practice. And you keep reminding people, both of you keep reminding people, took Louis 17 years. You're paying $600 to learn in 6 weeks. I spent 17 years of my life, half of those years suffering deeply, trying to understand. That's a bargain. Like that is a bargain. And so I'm really learning, it's the whole of the person and their experience that you get even in that 1 hour with them. It's not the hour.
Yes.
So it's good for people to hear that, because if you're working with it, because I remember when I was at poverty level and I was going to hypnosis because I was having such brutal flashbacks and PTSD, I couldn't function. And I thought, I need to go to hypnosis because there's something unconscious. I didn't know somatics at the time. And I think the session was $75. And that was breaking the bank for me. Like I didn't make that it took me like 3 or 4 days to make that much money. So I was like, okay, $75, I'm going to do it, because I knew that I was getting this like constellation of this woman in this 2-hour session. And I knew if I really dropped into that, so much would come up for me, instead of the idea of like, oh, 75 for 2 hours. That's insane, but I'm going to need at least 10 sessions. I was like, I'm going to get every inch of these 2 hours. And it changed my life. That one session changed my life. And I think it even helped usher me to somatics.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anyone wants to add to that before we close. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say I had a similar experience. I joined a membership. This was me leading up to leaving corporate America, and I still needed some support or guidance. And so I joined a year-long membership. It was a $3,000 commitment. But I was like, okay, I'm going to get this membership for 1 year, but I'm going to get so much out of this 1 year. And so it sort of forced me to be committed. I knew it wasn't something I didn't have the financial capacity to be in this membership like year after year after year. But okay, for 1 year, I'm going to make this financial commitment. And then because of this financial commitment, I'm going to make the time commitment, the space commitment. And I got a lot out of it. And it really did support my impetus to leave the corporate space. There is one other thing I wanted to put in the space, just so that I want folks to understand, like there's sort of this balance, or at least for me, when it comes to my relationship with money. Yes, I got to a point where I could set my prices and my rates without apology or without fawning. But it really was rooted in this idea of agency to be able to walk away from a relationship if they couldn't afford me, but also the agency to walk away from certain lifestyle things if I couldn't afford them anymore. Like, one of the reasons that I was really stuck in the corporate space is that there was this overcoupling of, well, if I can't pay my mortgage, I'm going to lose my house, and then people are going to judge me. Da, da, da. Well, maybe I just downsize. Yeah, maybe I just get a smaller house, because you can take the stress, I'll take less. Like, I'm now in this place where I realize, well, okay, if I'm not bringing in X amount, what are some things I can change about my lifestyle that will still support the capacity I need to function as the person I want to? So I just wanted to make sure that people understood there was that aspect to it as well.
I'm so glad you brought that in, because it was swirling in me and I didn't know when or how to bring it in. That the intention for me to have this conversation with you two isn't to speak about everyone should aim to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's to really speak about agency. And if I have a certain lifestyle that I'm currently living and it beckons a certain amount of money and I'm okay with that, yes, I'm going to charge more. If the reality is people don't buy my product anymore, and I have to, when I doubled the course, I remember I did the same thing you were just talking about. I was like, okay, what's the worst that would happen? I'd reduce my rate to what it was before. I'd have to pay people less, or they'd have to work less. And I would have to maybe even move to another state, because New York State is getting expensive, like, for real. And I thought, would that really be the worst thing in the world, to have an adventure to move to another state and live, have half of the amount of money that it takes for me to live in New York State? I thought, no, that'd be a beautiful new adventure, and that's what would be there for me. So the agency to have the flexibility of, and this is why I like capitalism. And I really don't like saying that, because
That's the soundbite that people are like, this is why I like capitalism.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's why I like to say it.
Do
That's why. Do it, Will. So Marika's trying to conspire right now, live on air with Will, who edits this, to soundbite me to get me canceled.
I love capitalism.
So I guess what I mean is I love our agency within capitalism. That's what I really, just like, I don't ever say, I guess I do say I love trauma. I don't like love that people get hurt, but I love our agency with the spirit of trauma. It's the same with capitalism. I'm like, if everyone didn't buy Coca-Cola for 1 month, do you realize how quick you could dismantle an oppressive system? I mean, it's like, that's how much power capitalism brings. So to me, I light up thinking, well, the reality of capitalism is if I'm unethical in my prices, people aren't going to pay. And that's good. That keeps me, it's like a natural check and balance. There's something almost pagan about it, like the laws of nature. And I think, beautiful. So I'm going to have to listen to that if that's the reality. And then I let my life take me to where that takes me. So that second piece of, well, okay, this is great. I love my rate. I love my life. Do I have capacity to pendulate to a different experience if that's the reality of it? What are you thinking, Marika? We have to close. I want to know what your thoughts are.
Just the formula and what you're talking about, and like and these goals and stuff work so well for like entrepreneurs and like, that type of thing. Where it's sticky for me is thinking about when I was purely in survival mode, and like it was, I either needed to take that job or live in my car, that type of thing. But that even that can be in support of your practice for leveling up and slower, right? And over time. And we love slow things here. But it isn't just if it's that job or poverty, that taking that job that maybe is not the thing that you necessarily wanted can at least get you to the next point, because we do still have to survive.
See, what you just said, no, what you said is really important, because if you're able to have these that kind of experience can suck if you don't have a practice like the ones we use. It can. And I've had, oh my God, a decade of those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily I had the practices because they lived in me. I didn't have the language for them, but I was just kind of intuitively playing with what you just said, titration, which was like, okay, I'm living on there's like futon mattresses. I'm living on a futon mattress in my friend's like nicotine-filled attic, which was like amazing because I didn't have to pay rent. But it's like, this isn't what I thought my life would be like when I'm in my 20s. But then I get a job at a corner store at a gas station, $7 an hour, right? And I'm like, titration. I start here. And just the gratitude of that job and the friends I made and the wisdom they gave me. I mean, I use things from those year, that 1 year at that job, I use in my private practice and the course, because the amount of things I learned from people there, incredible. And so what you're saying is important, because if I'm oriented toward what I wish I was having, I'm going to instantly feel a despair with my current reality. But when I orient toward, okay, what does this serve for me now? And this is fleeting. Can I be with it now? It just gently takes me to the next place.
Yeah.
And we could probably do, and we should probably do a podcast just about that, because we are talking entrepreneurially now. That's all of our experiences. But it'd be great to talk about, from our early experiences, how we navigated some of that, or how we would have if we had these practices. It sounds really good. Beautiful. Anyone have any closing statements or words or anything you want to throw out before we go?
General financial advice for any entrepreneurs out there, particularly women and people of color and LGBTQIA. Whatever your prices are, double them.
Mm-hmm.
You heard it. You heard it straight from the teacher's mouth.
Yeah, listen to Camille.
Listen to Camille. Because I just started listening to Camille and it's working. Mika, what do you want to add?
I mean, I think listen to Camille is probably what I want. But I mean, money is also a practice. It's emotional. It's something that you can, it felt like something that just was a tornado that happened in my life. And now it's really nice to be able to make actual decisions and have some agency in what money means in my life,
Mm-hmm. I love it. Thank you both so much. That's the end of today's episode. Now let's take a moment to notice where we feel the episode in our bodies. Close your eyes. Take a breath. And let whatever wants to come up, come up. And remember, those sensations hold the wisdom that we're looking for. If you want to go deeper, visit holisticlifenavigation.com.